Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Welcome to another episode of Bilal's Boulder. And we have a very special guest for you today, and he is none other than Asadullah Ali Al-Andalusi. Asadullah Ali Al-Andalusi is a research fellow for Yaqeen Institute. He's a member of the Muslim Debate Initiative and founder of the Andalusian Project, an independent research platform for Islamic studies. He holds degrees in both Western and Islamic philosophy and is currently pursuing his master's in library and information science. He specializes in topics related to the philosophy of science, atheism, terrorism, Islamic ethics, and other issues facing the global Muslim community. He also has an amazing iJihad series that you can check out on YouTube. Assalamu alaikum.
Waalaikumsalam. How
Amazing
are
to
you?
have you on the show. Alhamdulillah, doing well. How are you doing?
Good, alhamdulillah. Thank you for having me on,
Alhamdulillah.
and thank you for praising the iJihad series. It takes forever to make one of those episodes.
I'm
So,
sure many people are benefiting from that. So let's get right into it.
hmm.
Why are people leaving Islam? And do they have
Uh,
a point?
what sort of point? Let me think. Why are people leaving Islam? Well, there's a number of answers to that. I suppose we could put it all under one umbrella, although I think that would be to simplify it way too much. But a lot of it has to do with um, sort of a cultural, uh, I don't want to say colonialism, but also intrusion into the Muslim world, and also um, the fault of Muslims themselves. A lot of it has to do with the fact that when Muslims look around and they see how the Muslim world is and how the West is doing, they see an obvious dichotomy. They see that Muslims are doing poorly, Muslim countries are doing poorly, and they see the Western world doing fairly well in terms of technological and material progress in general. And that starts to place doubts in their heart. That starts to make them consider whether or not their religion is applicable to the modern world and whether or not, it has any relevance. Of course, there are other issues at the micro level too, like, family issues, dealing with other Muslims around you and seeing a lot of negativity, war, suffering, abuse, et cetera, et cetera. And a lot of it really, it really chips away at people's iman and their yaqeen, their certainty. And then they start to rationalize that doubt. They start to rationalize those insecurities by bringing in what I consider often weak arguments to justify them moving away and migrating, so to speak, ideologically migrating, or even physically in some cases, to the West, to the superior entity in the world today. That would be the gist of it.
Right. And do you think they have a point, basically, in leaving Islam? Because I think what we see today with globalization is the accessibility of many different worldviews, many different traditions, where you can simply go online if you're having any doubts or having any personal issues, and you can tap into whatever community, whatever fringe group that you'd like to access new views. In the past, there are arguments that in the past, like on the Silk Road, for example, there would have been, and even in the Library of Baghdad, that there would have been access to other ideologies, to other religions, to other worldviews at the fingertips of people, but I think not to the same level and same degree as they have today. But I think the question is also: is there anything innate, you think, in Islam that is not compatible to the modern life and modern world that these people are brought up into?
Well, do they have a point? Well, I don't think there's any rational justification, to put it that way. I think that there's more to believing in something than merely rational justification. You do require rational justification in order to believe something. That's always required. And in some ways, they would have if they combined the rational, the emotional, and just the existential together as one. But they tend to look at everything from only one perspective, or they tend to look at the problems of the Muslim world and the religion, quote unquote, the problems of the religion, quote unquote, in only one view. And so, for example, um, like I said, they tend to see the problems of Muslim world as being material, financial, power-wise, a lack of power, and they see this as being a evidence that the religion is problematic or the religion is not assisting the Ummah in any way, shape, or form, that it's not valuable. That would make sense if they were looking at, I think, the religion holistically, if they were looking at history holistically. Of course, in the past 100 years, the Muslims have been suffering, a little bit prior to that as well, but mostly in the past 100 years, Muslims have been suffering greatly in the world. But this is a very recent development in the Muslim Ummah. It's very recent. I mean, the past 1,400 years have been mostly success in comparison to other civilizations around us. So they rarely take this into consideration. This is just a small dip in our timeline. It's not really a big deal. So do they have a point? No, I don't think they have a point. I don't think that they really have any real justifications for their viewpoints. That said, you brought the sort of the information age, the access of information, especially at sort of the extreme that it is today. Never before in history have we ever had so much information at our disposal, in our view, that we've been able to access. However, I don't think that has anything to do with it, in a positive way, at least. Like as you mentioned earlier, in Baghdad and other places, even Al-Andalus, information was at the fingertips of everyone. Different viewpoints, different, beliefs, even from political to religious, were there in our libraries. We translated Greek works, for goodness sake. I mean, we had pagan text in our libraries for others to study. A lot of the scholars who dealt with a lot of these heretical movements and stuff, like Ibn Taymiyyah, for example, he had to have access to some sort of books, sort of knowledge, information that allowed him to really dissect Christian, Jewish beliefs, etc., and undermine them through his arguments. So these things were readily accessible. I think the problem is the information age has more of a negative effect on society than it has positive. Yes, we have a lot of information at our fingertips, but nobody knows how to interpret it. Nobody knows, what good research is, what actual evidence is. They don't know what a valid opinion is, or even a valid argument is. Half the people you talk to these days don't even know what a fallacy is, a fallacy of logic. You see them every day. So, I have a hard time believing. I always hear this really funny, statement online from mostly people who are vastly undereducated. And I apologize if that's insulting to many people online, but, it's reality. A lot of people say that Islam is going to die on the internet, or the internet is the death of Islam because, we have so much information at our disposal. Now we're learning the truth. It's like, no. I mean, if you haven't realized, conspiracy theories are also up. I think they just recently found out that more than anywhere else, any other time in history, flat Earth is popular. Like more than any other time in history. There are more flat earthers today than there were in the past. That's insane, right? That's insane. There are huge conspiracies online that become more popular than before because of the information age. And the information age, it's kind of it's a false label. It's really not an accurate label of what this is. You have a lot of information, but part of having a lot of information is being able to comprehend it. Otherwise it's just data. It's just an experience with something. It's like if you go outside and you see an animal that you've never seen before. It's an animal, but you don't know what it is exactly. You can't specify it, and then you start giving your own opinions and interpretations of these things, right? Of course, then a scientist, a biologist comes along, a zoologist comes along and tells you what that animal is. But so many, people in the world today, they're experiencing data, and they're literally just making up their own minds about it, and not referring to people who actually have knowledge of the subject matter. So I think the information age has done quite a bit of damage. That said, for ranting, this is something I'm very passionate about because, as you're already aware, I'm doing my master's in library and information science. So information literacy is a very important thing for me. It's something that librarians are supposed to be vanguards of, so all of my classes are really centered around this, believe it or not. That said, I think the other part of your question was, if you don't mind repeating it, I don't want to get misinterpreted.
Well, it was basically, is there anything intrinsic to Islam that is not compatible with the modern age?
I think there is, but not in a bad way. there are obviously a lot of things that are incompatible with contemporary ethos that we find in the world. I mean, a lot of people don't really realize this, but Western ethos are the dominant ethos today, which is why I find it ironic when people, attack Muslims around the world for doing certain things. And they say, oh, that's because of Islam. It's like, well, do you know that most of the Muslims in the world have been affected by Western ethos? So I mean, it's kind of hard for me to believe. I mean, especially if you look into terrorism studies, the majority of people that they interview, that they do psychological profiles on, and they look at their backgrounds. These people are largely secular, recent converts, quote unquote, who barely know anything about their own religion. So I mean, where are they getting these beliefs from when they're going around killing innocent people? Well, look at the body count with regard to Western wars overseas, like in Iraq and Afghanistan, etc. And you'll find that their teachers aren't of the Islamic ethos. It's Western intervention, Western militaries that are going around slaughtering 80% of the victims being civilians. So like the recent PSR report, for Social Responsibility report, which took all the studies on civilian deaths in the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan and calculated that over 2 million people have been slaughtered in those wars over just 10 years. I mean, it's grown substantially since then. So, if you want to talk about, I'm going on a rant again, but if you want to talk about like where ISIS is getting their viewpoints, why don't we look at that first before we start looking at Islamic texts? Because as far as I'm concerned, there's nothing in Islam that promotes that. But hey, I've just studied my degrees in university, and I've researched all this stuff, but who knows, right? Let's just go look online and read what Robert Spencer has to say. So anyways, so is there anything intrinsic to Islam that's, going back to this point, I think one of the things is that, yes, for example, the modern world is perfectly okay with killing civilians under the guise of collateral damage. Noam Chomsky pointed this out quite aptly, I think, in several articles and written over the recent speeches. He mentions that although the West prides itself in not targeting civilians during war, it doesn't seem to care that it's killing people accidentally. Yes, it's bad to target people, innocent people, and kill them. But what's worse, targeting them and realizing that they have some value as people, that that you're killing those people, or not caring, just stepping on them like they're ants. Like their lives don't even matter. And so he pointed this out. He said the West, especially Western militaries, have this tendency to think that for the greater good, it's okay to slaughter hundreds of thousands of innocent people because the objectives will be gained. I mean, that's a lot. That's indicative more of insanity than the other position. Mm-hmm. I would say in many ways Islam is not compatible with the modern world in that sense, but in other ways as well. So less extreme ones, I suppose. Family. Islam is more family oriented. Considers marriage to be very important. I lived in Malaysia for quite a couple of years. If you want to see the manifestation of those ethos in practice, go to Malaysia. Malaysia has, I think, about a 3% divorce rate. 3%. Now, a lot of Westerners will say, well, that's because, women are prisoners, and blah, 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 with all this biased nonsense. No, it's because they actually care about their family members. They care about having family. They care about keeping the family together. Not to say there aren't issues, obviously, but, I mean, there is a culture of family centered in the Muslim world, in many places in the Muslim world, and I think the West sorely lacks. Other ways, money is not as big an issue in the Muslim world. You hear about how Muslims are less developed nations because they don't have their financial systems as advanced, say, as many Western countries. But if you really consider it too, if you've actually been to a Muslim nation, most Muslims don't. Obviously, there are people who are very greedy, but Muslims have a much more centered approach to finances. They don't consider money to be the root of solving all their problems, or even the root of all their problems. Muslims have a much broader worldview in this sense. Whereas when you look at the West, especially in the United States, money is king here. Money is God in the United States. I don't care what people say. That's not even just a mean statement. That is reality. If you've ever lived in the U.S. for even a moment in your life, you'll know that. Money rules here. That's all people care about. Even religion is a hobby compared to money. Mm-hmm. Mess with somebody's religion here, man, nobody cares. Mess with the money, you'll die. at the very least get sued for more money, right? So that's really the king. Those are just few examples. But yes, I would say that Islam is not necessarily compatible with the modern world, and that's the reason why I think a lot of Muslim nations are also struggling to keep up with the West, because they're stepping out of their own ethos, their own paradigm to do so. And in many ways, that's a very narrow perception to have as well.
ليس
I don't know if I answered your question. Sorry.
No, you did, definitely. ليس العلم من كثرة التعلم ولكن العلم نور يقذفه الله في القلب المؤمن, which roughly translates to knowledge is not from an abundance of discursive learning, but rather knowledge is a light that Allah has projected into the hearts of the believer. In the same way that this is called an information age, I think it could be called a misinformation age. Because of the echo chambers of the postmodern world, we've actually created a system in which if you are on a fringe of society, you mentioned flat earthers. If you were a flat earther in the 1920s or 1930s, you kept it to yourself. Maybe you had some doubts on the spherical nature of the world. That was it. You never told anybody. You never spoke to anybody about it. That was it. You would be judged for it. Nowadays, there's a corner on the internet, no matter how deranged your belief is, whether you're ISIS, whether you're a flat earther, whether you believe that you are an animal in anthropological form, whether you believe that there are like Hansel and Gretel websites, by the way, people that actually literally want to be eaten by other people in an ethical way.
Love it.
Yeah, so every
In the meantime,
single...
I'll eat this kunafa.
Say that again?
In the meantime, I'll eat my kunafa.
By the way, people from Syria make the best kunafa. I'm not sure if you heard, but
I would say my wife does, just because I want to please her.
well, where's she from? If you don't mind me asking.
Bangladesh.
Okay, well, yeah. So I never knew they had kunafa there.
No.
So, but basically, every single fringe belief you can find, and I would say that the ex-Muslims also, it wouldn't be radical to say that they fall under that category. That in many cases, people from the Muslim world, they may be having these shubuhat, they may be having these doubts. And I'm not saying these grievances are not necessarily legitimate in some circumstance or in some way. But instead of going to the source and asking the questions to the right people, they are able to connect to someone online that says, well, this whole thing, again, like conspiracy theories, there's a place on the internet in which you could really get very deep into some legitimate areas, but also many false beliefs. Which leads me to my next question. As you know, echo chambers don't just pop out of nowhere. They are created. So what individuals, what organizations, or powers do we know are behind the funding of some of the more popular ex-Muslims and ex-Muslim communities?
I mean, prior to answering that, I also want to say that part of the reason I think this goes back to modern ethos, or Western ethos, is that with the democratization of politics, there has also been a democratization of knowledge, or the conception that everyone is equal in terms of their intellectual levels and in terms of their education, right? I mean, you have that online. Everyone has an opinion. They think they're an expert on the subject. They can go and question doctors, whether they be medical or otherwise, regarding their views. And of course, it's always good to have a healthy dose of skepticism regarding professionals, because not all of them are necessarily good, and of course bias sometimes comes in the way. But it has become an epidemic to the extent where now we literally have people online who think that credentials don't matter. Like having an actual education doesn't matter. Like all you have to do is look on Google and you have everything. Of course, the irony is that they don't realize that Google was also run by certain types of professionals, and that the information that they're getting online may also come from professionals, or just may be skewed by people who've already got that information from professionals. You see what I'm saying? So professionals, it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, you still have to refer to a professional. It's just who you consider the professional and whether and how you interpret that result, or the results of those professions and their knowledge, that determines what you think, right? So anyways, that's a whole thing. So it's a very narcissistic view that society has now that, and I hate when this happens, people call me arrogant all the time, and that's fine. They can do that. I don't care. But when I come out and say things like, you don't know enough, or you have no right to say this because you haven't studied it, or if I come out and say, you're out of your league, you're out of your depth, I often get accused of being arrogant, and I have to wonder, have you ever done any introspection? And I talk to these people because it's like, look, you realize that you're challenging someone who has actually studied the subject matter, or other people, not just myself, but other people, right? And we're not perfect, but when you come up and you say, I'm on the same level as you, who's really being arrogant there? The person who humbled themselves for several years before a master in the subjects, you know, and sat there and listened, right? Spent time, money, energy, everything to actually learn the profession, or some random person online who reads a Wikipedia article and goes, you know what, I know everything about the subject, I'm going to go challenge you now. I mean, who's really the arrogant one here? So anyway, that rant out of the way. Let's get to your main question. I apologize. I just wanted to bring that up.
I'll just butt in for one moment here, which is that we spoke about information. In many respects, in the time of Musa alayhi salam, the dominant tool was sorcery. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent them a prophet who had miracles that resembled sorcery in the raining of blood and frogs and locusts, etc. In the time of Isa, it's medicine. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent them a healer, somebody that was able to heal the blind and raise the dead to life and heal the lepers and heal those who are deaf. In the time of the messenger, it was Arabic, it was poetry, and so the Quran is the miracle of that time. We live in the so-called information age. I think in many respects, the inheritors of the prophets in this time, the ulama, have to be masters of information, but not just information, but knowledge. And knowledge is the good or righteous application of information. It is not, because you can use information for evil, and I think that is entirely what is being done. I don't think knowledge is a neutral thing. If you look at the Quran and the Hadiths, the word aql is never used for evil. It is always used for good, because intellectual pursuits are ultimately righteous ones if the intention is there. But that being said, people can use information. They can use facts and twist them and decontextualize them in a manner that is, shaitana.
Yeah, I agree.
But getting into the question, who's behind the funding?
Wow. So I haven't done any really deep research on this subject in terms of which organizations are backing other people. That said, I find that a lot of ex-Muslims these days, at least those not affiliated with a particular organization, those who consider themselves to be just online bloggers, things like this, right? They're getting their funding primarily from Islamophobic sources, but grassroots Islamophobia. So you have a lot of ex-Muslims online who can gather hundreds of thousands of people to their videos within days, simply because they're appealing to the mass prejudice. And a lot of Islamophobes, they love to congregate online. So in the same way that Robert Spencer gets a lot of funding, he gets funding from organizations as well, but from his user base. A lot of ex-Muslims have this as well, so they're sort of borrowing that. And ex-Muslims are getting this funding from the grassroots Islamophobia movement because they serve a purpose that I think many of them are well aware of, but refuse to reject because they know that if they did, they would lose all of their support. And of course, you don't want that, right? Ethics are nothing when money is on the table. Once again, the Western ethos taking over there. But they serve the purpose of being the noble savage. So who I like to call Kipling's poster children. If Kipling was still around today, he would love the fact that these people existed. They would be perfect representations of what he meant by the noble savage. They serve the purpose of being insiders in the Muslim world. And if you have an ex-Muslim, you're automatically considered an authority on the subject. You could be the dumbest person in the world, but if you're an ex-Muslim, you're a genius when it comes to Islam. It doesn't matter what you're saying. And they serve as cheerleaders for a lot of these people who have this sort of Western supremacy in their minds. It's like, okay, well, this person and they hate Islam, so they must be right. They must have researched. They must have done, because being a Muslim, you have to be an idiot. You have to be a barbarian. So the fact that they've moved away from that showcases that they've freed themselves from this mentality, and therefore they must be superior in their rationality when it comes to other Muslims around them, right? So it's that prejudice that's there that really props them up as these authorities, and they largely get a lot of funding from the Islamophobic the Islamophobic grassroots movement. And one example, I don't like to mention too much, but for example, one particular ex-Muslim online gets most of his funding from Hindu nationalists who just literally hate Muslims and wanted them to die. I mean, he's had to actually come out and write blogs, distancing himself away from people who literally want to go around executing and committing genocide on Muslims because they're a large part of his user base. Okay, so and he hasn't done anything else other than that, and he's still receiving funding from these groups. And I think you probably know who he is. I don't know if you should mention, but he's a large YouTube channel now. But yeah, I mean, these individuals they are funded primarily by normal people who just hate Muslims. They just hate Muslims. You know, we get 100,000 subscribers, right? And they all want to pay $1. I mean, that's a lot of money, right?
Definitely.
I don't know what they're looking for, but yeah, I have never done any real, huge research into advanced research into whether or not they're being funded by particular organizations or not. I'm sure that there are some government-based organizations that are like funding the ex-Muslim movement in the United States and abroad, but I really haven't. I'm pretty sure that they're tied to the Islamophobic movement as well.
I mean, I'd like to see if there's if there's a list of wealthy individuals that are involved in this and maybe seeing it as a form of philanthropy. But I do know that certainly many evangelical groups are probably involved. Certainly many Hindu nationalist groups are involved.
Yeah.
Groups or individuals also that are tied to Zionists may be involved. I actually wrote a post some time ago about, it's addressing those who left Islam or are considering leaving Islam. Because I feel that there are two kinds of ex-Muslims, basically. By the way, I don't like to use the word ex-Muslim, just simply because we don't really say ex-Christian, we don't say ex-Buddhist
Yeah.
generally. You're Muslim or you're not Muslim. We have a word for that. But generally, there are those who might leave Islam and they just kind of go out their business and live their life. But then there are those that are seeking attention, the kind of Sandra Solomons of the world, who are showing up at mosques, telling people to spy on mosques, showing up with very very confrontational attitude, and again they have videos. But I basically always say, look, number one, Allah's door is open, the forgiveness is always there, mercy is always there. Number two, I say don't be a pawn of Western imperialism, because whether you're Muslim or not, in many cases you're being used by the weapons industrial complex, by the various lobbies to attack people just like you, okay? People that might be your family members, your cousins, people that look like you, speak your language, eat your food, maybe even people that have similar grievances as you. Number three, Islam is not your parents, because in many cases we do know that there are issues within the family. Sometimes Islam is used as a force of control. But again, people have to be able to transcend that Islam is not your parents. Your parents are fallible human beings. In most cases, they love you, and they're trying to do the best for you. They're trying to do what they learned in their system, and they may not be wrong. Number four, Islam is not your Arab or Desi culture, which is self-explanatory. Number five, if you reject Islam, you may be just rejecting a particular understanding of Islam, interpretation, and not necessarily, there might be other interpretations that might be correct. You have tons of people that leave, for example, the Qadiani movement because they feel like they've been lied to, because the whole mantra is love for all, hatred for none. But then they look at Islamic history, they see contradictions to that, and so they become Christians. And Nabil Qureshi being a great example of that. And lastly, well, actually not lastly, I have a few others. And again, sorry to go on with this, but I said number 6, your ancestors were not all fools. It's likely that your family has been Muslim for many generations, and you may have better gadgets compared to your foreparents, but these are people that in many cases were scientists, in many cases were astronomers, were explorers, were people that were educated in different respects, and 1400 years of that, these are not fools. They have their whole life to think about whether there's a God or not. They have their whole life to read and to research, and to just, you are basically if your lineage is like an avalanche of people that are contributing to who you are today, in both social, economic, and also spiritual manner, you're like a little snowball at the end of that. And to
Yeah.
say that, well, this snowball is able to think superior to everything that came before it, I'm not saying that that's not true sometimes, but in some cases you have to consider that maybe you're the one that's wrong and not your foreparents. Number
Mhm.
7, Islam is not keeping you from a happy, healthy relationship. Because I see a lot of people, they see, well, Islam is this barrier to marriage, it's this barrier to relationships, so they just abandon that. They might come up with some reasoning, but in general, there could be these impulses that are motivating their reasoning. And lastly, I always say that the grass is not always greener on the other side. Sometimes the grass on the other side is fake grass. In many cases, these other worldviews, again, America looks great, good quality of life, seemingly, but we're talking about a 50% divorce rate. We're talking about very high rates of STDs. We're talking about 20% of Americans on psychiatric medication.
Yeah.
We're talking about thousands of alcohol-related crimes every year, drug abuse, which is on the rise, suicide rate, which is higher in the Western world than it is in the Muslim world.
Mhm.
Many people I know, they came from the Muslim world and they jumped right into this. They came from very strict, very conservative societies, and then they come to the West like they're a kid at the candy store, okay, with $100 with them. And
Look
then
at
it's
that.
like they come and they do everything, and then I'm not joking. I know situations they go back home, drugged up and addicted with what do they call it? Withdrawal symptoms,
Yeah.
and it's very sad to see this. But
Yeah.
it's all. I think these are all factors that anyone that is gonna make this decision. These are dunyawi factors, by the way. I'm not even considering
Yeah.
the aspects of judgment and Pascal's wager is a pretty solid thing that keeps some people grounded. But from a purely dunyawi perspective, there are many rational reasons for one to really think over that decision.
Yeah, and I agree. Many pragmatic reasons. Like you mentioned, they come over here and really realize there are a lot of flaws in the sort of society. And I've had the same experience, and I've had people in Malaysia and other places in the Muslim world who tell me, "Oh yeah, I can't wait to go to America. How is it over?" I'm like, dude, like my hometown of Chicago, more people die in that city every year than in the whole country. Like, can you just relax? Like, do you have no idea? You have no idea. It's a war zone. you
Yeah.
know, and if you're poor, like in Malaysia, and I know other Muslim countries, you have zakat. You have places where the poor people can go. They can eat every day. Have you looked in some of these inner cities in the United States? There are homeless people. There is food everywhere, and they can't find anything. They literally cannot feed themselves. Our healthcare system's messed up. We have some of the best healthcare in the world, but nobody can afford it. I had a couple of years back. I remember the story. It's clear as day. And when I read it, I almost cried, honestly, because it was like a guy went into a bank with a gun. It wasn't even loaded.
Yep.
Okay, he just found it. He pointed at the guy at the receptionist and he said, "Give me $1. I'll give you." And so she didn't know what to do. She hit the alarm and everything. The cops came and blew him up. And they said, "Why would you go to the bank with an unloaded gun for only $1?" He said, "I can't afford health care and prison gives it for free." Like, seriously? You would have to trying to go to jail to get health care? That's insane.
Mm-hmm.
That is insane. That is insanity. So yeah, I have the perception that regarding, it's ridiculous how these people idolize us because they see a few rich people, they see glamour, they see material wealth. They don't realize, like here, there are opportunities here, but it's also a trap in many ways. It is not easy to live here and be a spiritual person, not because everyone's more rational. To the contrary, as you mentioned, people question their ancestors. Most people in the past were smarter than most Americans. I'm gonna be frank. I'm sorry. I mean, that's just true. There are people in the past who had more profound thinking than most people living in the modern Western world. Yeah, we have a lot of tech and stuff, but only a very small population actually contributes to any of this stuff. Most people watch reality TV, can't remember what we did last Sunday, and don't even know, what they're here for. They don't question anything, and they all think they're genius. So, I find it funny when people say, "Oh, we're superior." It's like you don't even if you were in a time machine, you went back 1,500 years ago, you would probably die if you did. Like you wouldn't know what to do. You wouldn't be able to survive like with basic necessities. Like you would just completely just you would just die of starvation. Like you know, so I find that really funny too, and I agree with I concur with all your points. That said, I don't know if I answered anything, but I just thought I rant a lot, as you probably know.
No, you're answering. You're bang on with all these questions, mashallah. So, in your experience, what are the most common arguments against Islam today, and what would be the most succinct and absolute response to these arguments? So, kind of easy, catchy ways for Muslims to learn how to reply.
No, there's a few. I mean, the whole notion that everything has to be proven through science is nonsense. Best way to respond to that is just simply to point out the reality is that the majority of the people who are asking for this, most things they believe in, 90% of what they believe in is not backed by scientific evidence. Most of what they value, and that's important to know. It is important to know. So, for example, morals, human rights, family relationships like involving love and loyalty and freedom, all these things that we constantly talk about as being essential to being a human being. They have no scientific belief whatsoever. And yet, people fall when religious. Like, especially atheists. Like, oh my God, people know that human rights, they go off the wall. They just go crazy about it. They're willing to die to secure human rights for the rest of the world. It's like there is no evidence for these things actually being the case. They are still essential to the existential, to our existence, right? They create a lot of existential angst when they're violated. Evil, suffering, this creates a lot of existential angst. But in reality, the value of those things have no scientific support. There's nothing there scientifically to show that this is valuable to believe it. This is something that we need to believe it. It's just nonsense. So when I hear like, I need evidence for God's existence in a scientific peer-reviewed paper, I look at them and I laugh and I say, no, because if that were really the case, then 90% of things you believe in would be part of the same thing. But obviously we don't. Another thing, regarding to science, so when the Quran is often criticized, it's usually through a scientific lens. It's like, well, there's a lot of scientific errors in the Quran. Well, no, there aren't, because the Quran's not even talking about that stuff. At least from the view of a contemporary individual, right? The contemporary, it's funny because I meet a lot of ethnics and they say like, oh, it describes embryology wrong because it doesn't use the specific terms or it doesn't describe it in this way. It's like contemporary medical technology didn't exist back then. So why would you involve it in the Quranic message now? That makes no sense. It's like, and it's a literary text. It was meant to impress the poets and those with the strongest prose at the time. It wasn't meant to impress doctors and medical. That's never been the point of the Quran, or to express scientific facts. That was never the point. So that's one way of countering that. The other way is to showcase that the Quran makes a lot of allusions and tries to emphasize the teleological aspects of physical phenomena around it. So, one of my favorite passages that is often taken out of context by Muslims, for example, is the one where it says Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he mentions earth in numerous places, but when it says lays the earth out flat, and I apologize, I'm not a hafiz of the Quran, but I don't know precisely exactly where that is, but he mentions, I've laid the earth out flat for you, or I've laid it out, spread it out flat for you. And many of the early exegetes, classical exegetes, did not interpret this as indicating that, the earth is flat. That's what Allah is saying. No, in fact, Ibn Abbas said about this, but Ibn Kathir, who concurred with this view, mentioned that the purpose behind this is imagery with respect to giving benefits to mankind. So spread it out means to let all of the benefits of creation come out in a forceful action. And if you look deeper into that, you realize that it's actually referring to a carpet, an actual carpet, like what the Arabs used to pull the carpets out in the air, and they used to, unroll them, with a violent action, right, to make it comfortable, so they could lay it down so people could be comfortable on the ground, right? I don't know if that makes a lot of sense for people, but if you've ever been out in the desert and you want a rug, So you want to sit down you want to sit on the hot sand or the rocky terrain. You want to flatten out that rug as well to make it comfortable for people to lay on, right? So that was sort of the imagery that was being employed there. And it makes it far more beautiful in that respect and far more meaningful. But a lot of ex-Muslims, even Muslims today, read these things in a very, I wouldn't even say literal. It's not literal. Because even literalism requires a context, something to be literal, like something to be apparent. What do you mean by apparent? Apparent to the individual, but for something to be apparent, there has to be some sort of context that's already immediate in their mind, right? So what was apparent to you is not the same apparentness or the same zahir, it's not the same literal that it would be to somebody 100 years ago, right? Which is why when you say, well, you take the apparent first, well, no, what you mean by that is not necessarily from your own bias. You also have to consider the fact that there are context there coming from that bias, and then you have to see the intent of the passage. So this whole thing of, oh, I'm just reading it literally. It's like, no, okay, but what you mean by literal is not what really is the case. It's not the actual meaning of the thing. It's just what you are seeing that is apparent to you because you can't see the context beyond your own biases.
Yeah, it's not an astronomical statement. وَالْأَرْضَ مَدَدْنَاهَا وَأَلْقَيْنَا فِيهَا رَوَاسِيَ وَأَنْبَتْنَا فِيهَا مِنْ كُلِّ شَيْءٍ مَوْزُونٍ. So, I mean, this is really about balance. This is about making the earth easy to traverse. It's about vegetation. It's about mountains being placed in the right order. This is not about this is not an astronomical argument, and it's about the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in making the earth suitable for life.
Exactly. And even if you examine that, I mean, and as you noted about the mountains being placed, it's like, well, he's placing mountains, and obviously it's not flat, is it? I mean, there are things, what I'm saying? Like it's supposed to convey a meaning that was apparent to them at the time that we can now derive based on the context. We understand the context of the original audience, right? And it's supposed to be literary. It's supposed to be poetic. It's supposed to give off a sense of it's taking a daily occurrence in the life of a Bedouin, somebody living out in the desert, and it's turning it into a cosmic event. It's like, how you roll out your carpet, like this is what Allah did for you. He made it habitable for you. He made it safe. He made it everything for you, right? It's the same thing when he mentions like the earth is like a tent, and everything like that. It's like this is not supposed to convey a scientific meaning. It's supposed to convey, it's an image. It's an image that you're aware of, that you're familiar with. It's an intimate one, something that you're so intimate with. And now he's turning that, he's saying, look into the stars, look into the sky, and now imagine that same thing. But for all of creation, that's beautiful, right? And then people read this and go, oh, look, it just means that the sky made it really like a tent. And it's like, really? That's what you're reading? Seriously? Like, this is not... just...
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so moving on to slightly, we're going to change gears a little bit. So in one recent post, you briefly shared your grievances with the Muslim community and the Dawah scene. So
which one?
This is the one that we spoke about just before the call.
Oh.
So what are your biggest criticisms here, and what are the solutions?
Can you just give me a little bit just a gist of what you interpreted from that?
You spoke about being invited by the same individuals, and certainly not getting anywhere with certain audiences, I suppose. So so if you could explain like what you're referring to and what we can do about it.
Well, it ties into a lot of what we've already discussed. We live in an age where people want simple answers. They don't want to be nuanced. They want to be reactionary. I try to be as balanced as I can. I'm not perfect by any means, but I try to be nuanced and I try to express things in a way that I think gives the full picture. It tries to be holistic. And a lot of people don't like that. They want something they can digest within 2 minutes. They want something, I've had so many people messaging me like, oh, why are your videos longer than 10 minutes? And I'm like, I don't know, because I can't teach something in just 10 minutes. And I ask them back and I say, how long are your classes in university? Are they 10 minutes long? So, that's part of the problem, I think, is not just the attention span, but the lack of respect for knowledge, the lack of respect for answers for things that go beyond a meme, that go beyond sound bites, and go beyond a clip. The other problem is that, I think that there is a sort of competitiveness among da'is that is, I mean, it's always good to be competitive, but I think there's a lack of support from the actual dawah community towards their own da'is. We have certain figures out there who are very popular for certain reasons, which we can get into later, but they're not supportive of each other. Whereas if you look at the Islamophobic movement, you can have the biggest idiot on the planet with like an IQ below average spouting anti-Islam nonsense, and you have the biggest Islamophobe here bringing him onto his podcast, and trying to help him get followers and funding. For us, it's like I have to go out and beg some of the top da'is in the world to give me a shout out,
Yeah.
and I don't get a response.
No, you're
And
right.
it's fine, if you want to be like that, that's okay. If you want to be competitive, if you think that maybe I don't have all the right ideas, that's okay. You can disagree. That's fine with me. But, when we talk about we want to unify so we can combat this issue with atheism and apostasy and stuff, and yet here we are not even helping each other, it's like, well, what do you want me to do? Like, I can't, like, alhamdulillah, I have a lot of people who follow my Facebook and my YouTube, but, 5,000 people or 10,000 people compared to 150,000 from this Islamophobes channel, like, what am I going to do? I can't do anything. I'm literally like shouting in being drowned out. Like, there's no way anybody's going to hear my voice. So we have a problem in this ummah, especially in the Dawah community, where we don't want to support each other. And I'm not going to go into specifics who these people are,
Of course.
but I'm going to recall recently, and like I said, I'm not going to mention names. I went to a conference in London a few months back, okay, to combat atheism, and we were actually all brought together to talk about these subjects and what we're going to do. And I happen to recall one of the most well-known da'is in the world. We were talking to each other, listening to each other. He's talking about our ideas, and he's sitting there, going, and I've known him for a long time, and he's like, I love your work, I love what you're saying, I love what you're doing, I'll bring you over to my organization, let's go talk and stuff like this. And, said he was going to pick me up in the morning. I get up in the morning, don't hear from him back. Not even a reason. So for me, it's like, and like I said, I'm sorry to throw some shade. I'm not going to mention names because I don't want to start any drama or anything. But, it's like stuff like that. It's like you make these empty promises, or you say you want to be supportive of your brother, and then the next moment, you're just ignoring them because they might, people might listen to them more than you or something. Stuff like just little things. And I'm not trying to necessarily judge intentions here, but it's happened so many times that it gets you really frustrated.
Yeah.
Although I want to praise somebody before we go on, if we can. I'd like to praise Asadullah Ali Al-Andalusi, my cousin, because he's always been there since day one. I remember, even in my darkest moment, the moment I made that post and that you read, I remember he messaged me. One of the first people who messaged me asking me wanted to talk. And he's always been there for me. He's always wanted to share assets with me. He's always tried his hardest to help me. And I want to say that he's one of those brothers that you can really trust with regard to the Dawah scene. He doesn't discriminate with da'is or anything. He doesn't care, but he really tries to support everyone and move them up if he believes that they have the potential to do certain things and to help the ummah. But yeah, those are some of the reasons. And of course, the other reason is that, if I may, going back to sort of being overwhelmed, you're constantly being overwhelmed with all this hate and all of these arguments that you just can't tackle, and people ignoring your articles. Like, I remember writing that article about Aisha, in her marriage to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? And I think you read it in the Yaqeen Institute, and it took me months to write that with Professor Jonathan Brown. And I have presented this to a lot of Islamophobes. I presented this to a lot of people who keep bringing up this accusation of pedophilia and stuff, right? And having everything ignored, just having all the evidence, having everything you've written for months just ignored so that they can find a soundbite in there to criticize you for. This goes back to the information age not being about information and misinformation. It's so difficult to have a real discussion, a real intellectual discourse, when nobody wants to take the time to actually think about what you're saying or what you believe. And and exasperates that. It makes it worse when the Muslims aren't even behind you, when they refuse to support you in any significant way, and they prefer to attach themselves to more simplistic things, more simplistic answers.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's a lot of things, and I'm sorry, if some of this seems vague, but a lot of things put into one that have really kind of put me off the Dawa scene and really have made me question my role in it and made me question why I'm even doing it to begin with. I'm still continuing, and I still have that sentiment that I need to step away eventually. And maybe we could talk about those if you want. It's up to you.
Sure.
But,
Well, I mean, just very quickly, I think in some cases they're looking for superficial answers because that's all they're used to when it comes to religious discussions. Some people have a very superficial belief system. And you mentioned Abdullah Andalusi. I love the brother. I met the brother when he came here to Toronto. Alhamdulillah, like he treated me with great dignity and respect, and we met and we parted as brothers. He went back. He came in the winter. I don't really know why people do that in Canada. I was like, why don't you come in a warmer month, for God's sake? Like, it was minus 40 degrees, okay? You were going to ask if it's Celsius or Fahrenheit. It's the same. Minus 40 is the same for both. So he came, mashallah, like he soldiered on in the winter. But you know what? He was invited by organizations, without mentioning names, that I feel like he kind of was there to legitimize them, if that makes sense. He was there as the complex, nuanced, intellectual speaker. But they touted something very superficial. And in many cases, it legitimizes those people. And I'm sure he's aware of it. I haven't spoken to him about it. I guess after this interview, maybe I will. But in some cases, I think you're, mashallah, someone that's very well respected. And so people might use you to appear in their banners, to appear in their conferences, as a way to kind of tout their reputation. Because you are somebody that offers, again, nuanced and complex and intellectual arguments, and not something that's simple. And on this theme, I wanted to say that I have a revolutionary dawah idea. Okay, are you ready for it?
Sure, go ahead.
So I have a great one. You're going to love it. So let's bring our cameras, okay, to the street corner, and we'll get into 10-minute arguments with people and, like, waterboard them with information and vernacular and slang. And then when they start agreeing with us just to walk away, we'll pressure them to say something in a different language so that they can walk away, and then we won't follow up with them. What do you think?
I don't really like that.
Well, and this is my argument. I think that so much of Da'wah today, and there are great people, by the way, in the Da'wah scene. And now, Sadat Anwar in Toronto, amazing guy. He's out in the cold, having long-form conversations without the cameras. And there are some great people doing street Da'wah. But man, oh man, like I cannot help certain, again, short form, 3 minutes, 10 minutes, look at this shahada, oh my God, guys. And again, very superficial. And I mean, I'm sure these are the same people that complain about your videos being more than 10 minutes.
Yeah, I think I'm going to be just more blunt here. You don't mind? I hate street Dawah.
Okay.
I absolutely hate it.
Yeah.
Because of exactly what you're getting to here, is that it seems extremely superficial. It doesn't really get to the heart of the matter. It's a lot of quick baiting, trying to overwhelm your opponent with a smoke screen.
There's something egotistical about it. There's something. It's like an arm wrestle, you get the dopamine hit, I guess, when they get the shahada or whatever. I went to an event. I mean, I didn't go to this event, but I watched it online. I was supposed to go to an event on the case for street Dawah. It was an event here in Toronto. I liked the presentation generally. It was given by Sadat Anwar, who I think is the best of the best in that street Dawah world, which isn't saying much, okay? But he's a good guy, and he made a decent case. I mean, there are others definitely, like the Hebrew Israelites and stuff, who are doing street Dawah, and it seems to be working out for them. But I don't know how effective this is. This is kind of a very Jehovah's Witness-y type of thing, where you just gain a reputation for being the Bible-thumping creeps who are knocking on doors and harassing people in jumpsuits, right? And yeah, it is. I mean, you have to remember that, like, I'm probably going to get in trouble for saying this. Muslims are already depicted on television as scary looking, basically, and Hollywood's doing a great job of perpetuating that phobia. Um, so yeah, I think when a non-Muslim sees like a bearded guy in tracksuit coming at them, and with speaking, I speak Arabic, I can say it. We have a very throaty language, mashallah. Um, yeah, it's scary, especially because that's the way it's depicted in the media. So yeah, I do think that again, I don't have a lot of followers, but alhamdulillah, you gotta like your own stuff, I guess.
Yeah,
Um,
I agree with you though. I mean,
yeah.
I think that it's problematic and for other reasons as well. Going back to the vernacular and it's intimidating. It's quick. Most people walking around don't want to get into some deep intellectual discussion. They want to go shop or to be entertained or go eat. You know what I mean? Like you can't really. I've never bought this idea that you can just stand there for 10 minutes and shout at each other in the middle of a crowd, and then somebody comes to a reasoned opinion, about the subject. Um, and it seems to be like you scoring points. Oh, let's see how many shahadas are you getting. Well, are you really getting a shahada? I mean, are you really the guy just saying it doesn't necessarily mean that he's going to be Muslim for the rest of his life, or even that he's a Muslim man. He could be just saying that, right?
Hmm.
Have you followed up with these individuals? I mean, do they really understand what they're converting to? What I mean? Like that's the thing. Like, I don't see these ever being asked. We're so obsessed with having more numbers. It's like, what about the quality? And I apologize, and this may get me in trouble, but because I've said this a few times in the past, and people don't like it. But it's like, some of these ex-Muslims that leave the religion, when I see them and I see the way that they're reasoning it, and I'm like, thank God they're gone. Like, thank God, because if they probably would have ended up in ISIS, they're so stupid. Like, honestly, like
Yeah.
I am happy they fell from the tree. You
So
know,
so yeah. So
I'm
so
sorry.
I want to say something on this. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So yeah, we do have this issue of, in the past, it may have been anarchism and communism, but basically you do have ideologies that are attractive to people with psychiatric disorders, people that might be intending on harming others. And I think in some parts of the world, you know, maybe to get attention, maybe to find ways of harming people, like, we might end up, propagating Islam to such people. That's a possibility. I've seen it definitely. A lot of the people that end up joining these extreme organizations do tend to be converts or people that are very recently religious. And I think, here's the thing. So I feel like if this dawah was genuine, yeah, exactly, quotation. I feel like if this dawah was genuine, the effort would be placed on the integration of converts as opposed to just the getting of converts. The getting of converts, there's an ego rush, and it's obvious why people do it. It's great entertainment for YouTube. It makes you feel like you've won an argument, etc. But what happens the next day? Okay, are we really going to be marrying these people to our daughters? Are we going to be welcoming them in the mosque? Are we going to be supporting them? Are we going to be there for them when their parents kick them out of their house? Are we going to be, giving a portion of our zakat money to them? This is, I think, a very critical issue, because I know tons of converts who were there for the easy shahada. They somehow lost communication or maybe fell out with the people that were involved in their conversion, and then they have no support in the community. They're basically stared at in the community. They're judged for having, let's say, tattoos or having a past life, past relationships, past lifestyle. And then there's nothing they can do about. And here's the other factor in all of this that we haven't mentioned. The people that we understand the best are people of our own cultural background, but yet you find very little dawah being done towards people of our cultural background, and the focus of dawah being done in the English-speaking circles. So in other words, there's this obsession with gaining white, blue-eyed, blonde-haired converts, because it's winning over the kind of colonial enemy or what have you. This object of hatred and lust at the same time. But there isn't that same attention. Many of these uncles who are doing the street dawah, who may not really understand Western culture so much, they're not giving the same attention on people of their own culture who may have lost the faith or are less religious. And I think in many cases we're actually better off doing dawah to those people who are already in the community, may already have Muslim relatives, may already be in a Muslim family, as opposed to kind of going to the street corner and that sort of thing.
No, I mean, I agree. Um, and just to give you an anecdote, I was one of those converts. I was actually, I converted within, during my bachelor's degree, there was a large Muslim community within the university that I was attending. And I converted within that community. So I still had my support group, but it was still difficult. I still became homeless. I lived in the Musalla for like a month.
Yeah.
Actually, a little more than that. And, there were brothers who would actually help me. And I lived in my car at one point, taking showers in the gym, and the statements that were made about me when I was walking the masjid. Oh, alhamdulillah, you converted to Islam. Where are you from? Blah blah blah. And I would mention that I'm a revert, and I'm from this background, from a Spanish background, raised in the United States, and automatically all these stereotypes. Or I'd be called. I didn't even have like pejorative terms used for me by Indian Muslims. Angora, like this statement. Yeah. There was a point where I was going to get married, and parents rejected me because I was a Gora. Things like this, or I wasn't becoming an engineer or a doctor, and mostly racial and cultural things. And that happened even when I went to Malaysia. And not among the Malays, believe it or not, it was actually because I was going to International University, ISTAC, UIA, or IIUM for people who don't know. And I was with the international community surrounded by Persians, Turkish people, Arabs. And they treated me a lot of them treated me like I was garbage. Oh, I'm American. I'm from the United States. I'm originally European. So I must be this horrible human being. And of course, I did have a past because, when I was a Muslim, I did drink. I did have girlfriends. And, of course, that was part of my culture, right? And they would judge me for that. It was so difficult being part of this community. And Muslims, above all else, and I apologize if it's going to offend a lot of people, have made me more upset than anyone else. But I've never blamed Islam for it, which is another reason that I have very little sympathy for a lot of ex-Muslims who make these complaints. Because it's like, well, if I could get through that,
right.
If I could say, hey, this is not Islam, and still continue as a Muslim, then what is wrong with you? So that's one thing. So I agree, there is a lack of support, there's a lack of real concern for converts. And even then, when the convert is sold the religion, and they believe in that religion firmly, the Muslims around them suddenly abandon the very principles that they tried to sell you. Oh, there's no racism in Islam, brother, but you can't marry my daughter because you're not the right skin color or you're from a different background. And it's like, well, why did you tell me this before I said my shahada?
Yeah. This is a personal question, if that's okay. Have you ever gotten any comments about not looking converty enough?
Interesting.
Basically, I'm saying this because there's a sister who, alhamdulillah, recently got married, but was having trouble getting married because, in her hijab, she didn't have the sort of facial features that are typical of a white lady. And so when people were looking for converts to marry and they'd see her, it would be like, yeah, she looks too Muslim, quote unquote. And I mean, I have the opposite problem. I think I look fairly ambiguous, and I think that subhanallah, sometimes I'll walk into a musalla, and I think I was one of the only Arab kids that was actually praying in my university, subhanallah. But basically, the Desi kids in there who were a little bit darker, they'd be like, oh, bro, what brought you to Islam, brother? I'd be like, I was born Muslim, alhamdulillah, I stayed Muslim. Everyone's born Muslim, but you know what I mean. So did you ever get the opposite problem of people facing any form of rejection because it's like, oh, you're Portuguese, you're not exactly the same kind of convert that they're expecting?
I think because I've been Muslim for almost 12 years now, so now I'm getting where it's like, oh, you're really a convert, because people mistake me for being Pakistani, some people mistake me for being Arab. Now, that's not necessarily their fault because I do have Arab blood. I'm from southern Spain, right? So we look Arab. A lot of my ancestors look Arab. A lot of my immediate family members are My uncle's name is Abdul Saeed.
Wow.
So, and he's not even a Muslim, right? So, you know, I do get that thing where it's like they think you're a certain culture. I have been asked in the past, like whether I'm when I came, how I came to Islam and stuff like that. They perceive me. It really depends on the culture, I think, and what they're used to seeing. Among Malays, they typically ask why I converted. They see me as a convert. But like, yeah, Indians and Arabs, sometimes they mistake me for their own ethnicity.
Right.
And then they make certain judgments about me. And it also doesn't help that I wear whatever clothing I feel like. Like sometimes I'll wear jubas and sometimes I'll wear like, kurtas and stuff. So like, I do wear whatever I want. Sometimes I'll even wear a baju Malayu, which is like the Malay version of a kurta. So like people think like, well, where are you from? I'm like, well, I don't know. I just like wearing these other clothes. It's not a big deal. So people have a lot of stereotypes. Muslims have a lot of stereotypes. I think that doesn't help. So yes, it has happened a few times.
Yeah. Okay. Just curious. So I actually, let's get, and we can talk forever, and inshallah we can do like a part 2 in the future.
Sure.
But let's go into a couple more questions before we end it off.
Sure.
Do you think Muslims in general are poor at rational thinking?
Yes.
Is it problematic? Yeah. Well, thank you.
So,
Is it problematic that young Muslims are repackaging the arguments of Christian apologists without recognizing the repercussions that may have on our theology? Because those assumptions could be made, they could be rooted in non-Islamic theology. So, like, what is the danger of repurposing, whether it's Christian arguments, whether it's liberal arguments, conservative arguments, alt-right arguments with an Islamic framing?
So first, I want to qualify what I said earlier when I said yes, and I agreed with the fact that Muslims are sort of lacking in rationality. I want to say that Muslims are very capable of rational thinking. I think that they very much can. We have a lot of very intelligent people in the Ummah. I just don't think that they're trained properly. They're not being educated to think rationally. I think there's a profound ignorance in philosophy these days. And even among Muslims who adopt philosophy, they tend to adopt it wholesale. They tend to adopt certain specific paradigms wholesale without really questioning what those are, because they think that those are the answers to combating certain things. I see a lot of Muslims nowadays who are learning about philosophy now. They're adopting Aristotle.
Right.
I'm like, why would you do that? Like, no offense. Like, you can go into that later. There's a lot of things that are wrong with Aristotle. Why would you start adopting, or even older Kalam arguments? It's like, those don't apply nowadays, especially to a lot of the issues that we're having with atheism and things. But, we see a lot of people, and you can disagree with that. But, for example, I find the Kalam cosmological argument to be wholly inadequate to dealing with atheists, because they're more epistemologically focused now than they are ontologically. They don't care about ontology. Right. Most atheists will tell you that they don't care about whether something actually is the case. What they care about is whether they can rationally justify believing in that thing. Right. So I think there's a wrong approach in adopting sort of medieval Kalam arguments to advance contemporary perception of Islam. I would say that Muslims are lacking rationally. I think it has a lot to do with our institutions and lacking the thinking that philosophy of critical thinking in general is a sort of haram subject. It's going to lead you down the wrong path. Although I've never seen somebody be an ex-Muslim because they took a philosophy course.
Right.
Frank. Most ex-Muslims I talk to don't even understand what a basic fallacy is, so I highly doubt that. But yeah, I think that, what was the other part of your question? I'm sorry.
Well, basically about repackaging arguments coming from other paradigms, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's also sort of like because we're not really studying our own tradition. And I don't think that we're really examining it with any real depth, real nuance or real any sort of real full comprehension. I think that we're trying to look for superficial answers, and that's the reason why we see a lot of Muslims attaching themselves to William Lane Craig or trying to readopt Alvin Plantinga's views of reformed epistemology, which is fine to a degree. Mm-hmm. But if they happen to recall Islamic history, Muslims didn't just translate Greek text and then borrow from them.
Right.
They translated them, looked at what they had to say, and then modified them.
Right.
Modified them considerably, like to the point where they weren't even the same. Like there was no similarity between the things, right? Like most Muslims, classical scholars rejected a lot of Aristotelian assumptions. I mean, that's why Ghazali's whole work against the philosophers was largely aimed at individuals, even within the Muslim world, who are adopting Aristotelian presumptions. I mean, this has been an ongoing battle between Muslims, and those who typically won are considered orthodox, or those, I'm sorry, I use scare quotes, but those who are considered to be the mainstream thinking are the ones who combated this sort of mimicry, right? Why Ibn Rushd is still considered to be the minority here.
Right.
But you see Muslims nowadays, they're just adopting a lot of Christian arguments wholesale. And they're not really considering the problems associated with them, like with Neoplatonist ideology and Aristotelianism. There's several issues. And honestly, if I just give my opinion here, I think if people really want to know how Islamic theologians have typically thought in accordance with our tradition, one good example would be Ibn Taymiyyah. And he's very controversial, yes, but he takes a very no-nonsense approach towards philosophical assumptions and even logic. He really goes after a lot of Greek conceptions of reality and through Islamic principles. This is a way that I think a lot of Muslims need to train themselves to stop borrowing from all these Christian thinkers. I mean, you can borrow some things. Some of them had good ideas that concord with Islamic theology. I'm not saying that, right? I want to be nuanced here. I'm not saying reject them wholesale. But don't adopt them wholesale either, because a lot of their assumptions are coming from a background, a paradigm that is not ours. So, yeah.
Well, a few things. Firstly, in some cases, like you mentioned, the Christian arguments are being repackaged, whether it's William Lane Craig's arguments or C.S. Lewis's, points being repackaged and sold as Islamic arguments for the existence of God. On another level, there's the whole issue of the continuity of Greek philosophy. Obviously, people like Mullah Sadra, you can say consolidates much of Greek philosophy into something that's more Islamaic. One can say that Ibn Arabi's philosophy has something Neoplatonic about it. Certainly, this is a big issue, but I do want to say that when it comes to this issue of repackaging, it doesn't just apply to theology. In many cases, we can see Muslims using the kind of Foucauldian activist methodology and applying that on Islamic social justice causes. Or in some cases, you can find the biologically centered arguments that the new right is using on issues like gender. And they're, again, putting an Islamic facade on it, as opposed to coming up with something that's spiritually centered or something that is based on the maru'ah, Islamic concept of manliness, and futuwa, the Islamic concept of chivalry as found in the tradition. They're just finding chemical, psychological, biological, anatomical reasoning, which are common in certain parts of this political spectrum, and they're just repackaging it, representing it as Islamic argument. So, it's a multifaceted problem. Yeah.
Yeah, there are many figures who are adopting the postmodernist approach and then sort of taking talking points from the alt-right and then try to put Islamic wrapping on it. Yeah, and this is obvious. Those are the Islamic feminist quote and have the I don't know what you call the other side. And they're attempting to. And it's all about reactionarism. It's all reactionary to the problem there. And there is nothing really rooted in the Islamic tradition from a lot of these reactionaries. They take certain things, certain axioms, certain principles, certain evidences, from the Quran and Sunnah and fiqh, but then at the end of the day, when you really investigate these things, it's far more complex, it's far more holistic than that. Mm-hmm. There's a lot more involved, and it's unfortunate. It really is unfortunate. And being caught in the middle is probably the most unfortunate thing.
Right.
Especially when you're trying to implement Islamic principles on a holistic level, you're often accused by both sides of being the enemy. That's the biggest issue.
Oh yeah.
And it's also horrible for marketing. You know what I'm saying? Because it's like, well, if you're not seen as being an extreme end of one or the other, then people don't want to follow you because they don't want to be confused with one side. So
So jumping into the next question, how someone thinks can be more important than what someone thinks, because some of those conclusions could be purely accidental. Uh, what is your epistemology? What is your operational logic? How do you arrive to metaphysical and ethical conclusions?
I'm a pragmatist.
Can you explain?
I'm a philosophical pragmatist.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that's just a new word for something that's very old. Um, I consider the workability of theories and ideas and perceptions. I consider the coherence of things. I don't like to justify anything based on empirical methods alone or based on rational methods alone, meaning like logic. Like for me, things like modal logic is nonsense. Like I don't care about possibilities because they don't exist. Like for me, it's like they could, but that doesn't mean anything to me.
So you're a friend of inference of the best explanation, basically.
Yes, actually,
Yeah.
the best explanation for me is the true one.
Well, of
True as you,
course.
you
Well,
know.
so Henry Corbin, who's my spirit animal. Well, I'm not good enough yet for that, but anyway, so he speaks about 20th century and 19th century and in extension 21st century Western philosophy. We'll call it modern Western philosophy and science and education being focused on the empirical. So sensory evidence that is repeatable, observed in a lab setting, recently in a, let's keep it real, Western university. Um, and then there's the other side of the spectrum, which is the rational, so empirical, rational. But what he says is that in the middle, what exists is what he refers to as the imaginal, and the imaginal is basically some combination of the two. You can say that in our dreams, for example, and in our imagination, we are able to tap into a kind of realm which is creative, which a lot of our new ideas come from, and which a lot of our inspiration may come from, and our new discoveries may come from. And it's basically, I mean, this goes back to ontology, which is that you cannot imagine something that doesn't exist. You can imagine flying pink elephants with wings, but the wings exist, the pink exists, the elephants exist. You're just, fusing everything together. So there's this idea, I mean, in most people's thinking, the imaginary, the imaginal, is just fake. It's because it's not, it's superficial. It's not something that's tangible. But I think the reality is that when you take people who live on opposite ends of the earth, they could have the same metaphysical schema. And this was very common in the ancient world, where their religious ideas, their dreams, their myths, that there's a lot of commonalities between these things. This goes back to Carl Jung and also Joseph Campbell's thinking. But basically, the imaginal world in Islamic metaphysics would be referred to as alam al-mithal. And so this is something that people like Jung and Corbin and others are interested in studying, because it's looking at imaginal thinking as a form of knowledge, as opposed to just being something that is just, pixies and fairies. Basically, it's trying to build a bridge between the rational and the empirical, because the world of dreams, the world of thinking, of creativity, of art, is somewhere in between those two things. It's not exactly rational and it's not exactly empirical. It's in that gulf that exists in between. So I think Western civilization, while it's focused on the empirical, in many cases philosophy is no longer that relevant anymore. I think most people have bought into utilitarian philosophy. That's kind of their end-all, be-all method in judging what is considered morally correct or morally abhorrent. I don't think most people are literate when it comes to logical fallacies or what Aristotle said or what Plato said or what Xenophanes or whoever said. Nowadays, it's entirely built on utilitarianism, which doesn't really have a moral claim. Its claim is its expedience, basically. That, hey, this works. This is the best system we've come up with. That is what it has going for it. So it's not even entirely rational. It's purely just, expedience.
Well, I would say experience and pragmatism. Um, as in, what works. Well, what do you mean by what works? What works is, for pragmatism to be like, well, we helps us to function, makes the business most coherent, things, etc. So it's not the holistic. I just want to make that to the audience, man, because the difference. Pragmatism is a little bit more involved with the entire human experience, not necessarily just what gives you the best, what gives you results. So that's not the case. That said, I agree with a lot of what you're saying, which is one of the reasons why I tell a lot of Muslims that you should learn about philosophy is not necessarily to adopt those philosophies, but to learn about how people think. See, for me, philosophy is like psychology. It's like you understand how people view the world if you understand philosophy, because you understand where those ideas are coming from, right? So the moment you understand somebody's philosophy, you understand their psychology in many ways, right? So because that's how they rationalize their views. That's how they rationalize the way that things are. And if you can undermine that, then you can get the heart of the issue. That said, I would probably disagree with the sense that the imaginative, or what we might consider the fitra, the intuitive level of knowledge would be the middle of anything. For me, it would be at the foundation of everything. Because as you view the empirical, as you view data in general, in the abstract, a lot of these, everything is interpreted based on the paradigm that you adopt. I can walk outside today and see a tree, but my understanding of that tree, my understanding of the essence of that tree, what that tree is, how to define it, how it fits within the world, is all dependent on things beyond my experience of that thing. Mm-hmm. Right? There's a lot of underlying things that are not self-evidential. I hate that word. But intuitive.
Right. Yeah. Definitely. I mean, this is kind of this also gets into the idea that I forget who said this exactly, but there's this point about a very famous Muslim theologian who had 70 arguments for the existence of God, and him walking by and some old lady saying, why does he need 70 reasons to believe in God, or 70 proofs? Isn't it obvious? Isn't it intuitive that God exists? Why would you need reason? So there is this aspect of Islam. You don't really see the Prophet ﷺ making many philosophical arguments and that actually converting the Sahaba. Of course, there are some rational arguments that are made by the Quran, in the Hadith, but generally speaking, it's kind of the character of the Prophet that converted the majority of people, and so the effect of I went to an event actually by Yaqeen Institute recently in Toronto.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, and so the event was called The Psychology of Doubt. And I don't remember the speakers exactly. One of them was Zara Khan, but there were two other speakers who were...
Was Zohar there?
Sorry?
Was Zohar there?
I don't remember their names, so you're embarrassing me slightly.
I'm not trying. I don't remember.
No. Yeah, so... Anyway, so basically the whole event was about the kind of chemical, psychological, and behavioral process that one goes through when they're experiencing prejudice, so-called Islamophobia, or when they're doubting their religion. And in many cases, the best way to speak to such a person is not necessarily to get into, like, someone may come to you with doubts, and you may just answer their doubt specifically. And you may do so very succinctly and in a well-spoken way, in a way that is entirely consistent logically. But you haven't really solved the problem. In many cases, they'll come back to you with that same doubt, or maybe you'll solve the problem very temporarily, and they'll have other doubts, and that keeps manifesting, and they'll keep coming back to you. In many cases, I think the solution is very, very simple. It's follow the sunnah. And the sunnah is to be there as a human being for that person. To be warm, to be respectful, to be inviting, to remind them of the mercy of God and to remind them of death, to be a Bashir and Nadir, basically, to give good news but also warnings. In many cases, I find that actually being there for these people that have doubts works just as well as giving them the right arguments and the right logic. I think in many cases, people like yourself, you mind if I psychoanalyze you for a second?
I'm fine. You can do it if you want.
Say that again.
You can do it if you want.
Well, so converts, people that live in the West, people, Muslims that grow up in the West, in many cases, we have to rely on that philosophical side, because the communal side wasn't there for us.
Hmm.
Okay, so we have to we have to take a bigger dose, basically, of the actual proofs for Islam and the rational arguments for Islam, and we have to live in that world, basically, partly because the community hasn't been good to us, in a sense. So we have to, we're basically forced into that world of looking into the arguments for Islam in an abstract sense. But I think had the Prophet ﷺ been here, he would have emphasized that, certainly. And the importance of that cannot be stressed. And there's not enough of that, in fact. What you're doing is something that's extremely rare in the community. But in so many cases, it's in my experience as a teacher, being there for the person, being warm, being respectful, listening to their doubts without being judgmental, and caring for them genuinely will get you great results. And in some cases has to be complemented with the rational side.
I agree. I believe that Joaquin is trying to be balanced in that respect, which is another reason they get a lot of criticism from both sides of the market. Because they're attempting to sort of reach out in both ways. I'm one of those people, like you said, that it's really about the whole mushiness. It's very rare that we get people in that way. I can only think recently there was one person that I talked to, and alhamdulillah, who returned back to the faith. But, I'm not really good at that. So I'm kind of the other part of Yakin, which is like, just go after everything.
Yeah.
So they use me for that and not alone. You never do it at some of these other events for that reason. So that said, I agree that there is a psychological element that needs to be addressed, emotional element that needs to be addressed. At the same time, there needs to be balance, because there are two sides that are also suggesting that we need to be extremely harsh, and then the other side says we need to be extremely merciful. There's either too nice and there's too harsh. And there are times when you can see on my page there are some ex-Muslims that come in and I'll go after them really harshly. And some people question, they say, well, why are you doing this? Bring them in, because you can tell when somebody's sincere about it. Mm-hmm. And sometimes you have to step on people. It's just, I know it sounds harsh and bad, but it's like sometimes you do have to do that. Because, you can't have these battles with people, intellectual battles, intellectual jihad with people, and not expect there to be casualties, intellectually speaking. You have to go after these people with all your might, because they're not interested in learning. They're not coming to your page to have a nice discussion with you. They're coming there to undermine you, to mock you, to give themselves a platform. And the best way to do dawah in that situation is not to do dawah for them, to do dawah for everyone around them, to showcase the individual's insufficient in their reasoning, to showcase how this person is embarrassment and how this person should not be taken seriously. And unfortunately, I have to employ that method because there are a lot of really arrogant people out there who have never been stepped on.
Yeah,
okay?
yeah.
So that makes me controversial, but I think the problem is and many of us have that approach as well. There were times to mercy and there were times to lay down the law. You had to do it.
It's difficult to strike the balance sometimes, for sure.
It is. And it's in this day, this reactionary age, that people perceive even one of your activities, even one of your behaviors as being all that you are, because they can't understand how, they can't understand the circumstance.
Right. Yeah, no, definitely. You're absolutely right. And in some cases, you have to show, the audiences, their audience, your audience, that they really have no excuses left, right? So that you've answered their arguments, and, you've done everything you can for them. You've given them the good cop and the bad cop routine. But that ultimately, you have to show everybody else in the room that, you've done your job, both in your akhlaq and in your precision. And that's it. At some point, they either have to accept it or reject it. Sometimes people that are in this scene, they're asked to go, you hear from somebody, hey, my son is having doubts, can you come speak to them? They're not practicing Islam, etc. And I always say, one conversation is not necessarily going to turn that around. And there are cases where I'll ask them straight up. It's like, okay, what issue was it that led you to doubt Islam? And they might come up with something like, well, I didn't like the story of the Tower of Babel. And I'll be like, that's not even in the Quran, that's not even in the Hadith, that's not really an Islamic story. Or they'll be like, what's another one that I've heard? They'll ask about Hajar. You know, why did Sayyidina Ibrahim a.s. kick out Hajar? And it's like, even that, like the circumstances behind that are not delineated in the Quran or the Hadith. Again, this is from the Bible. So in many cases, the arguments are tenuous, and then you tell them that. You say, well, you know, I'm not sure where you're getting this from. This is not really a clutch to be hanging on. This should not be a watershed issue. But again, I'm there for one conversation, maybe 30 minutes, maybe 3 hours. The family has a responsibility to look at what is it that led that person down the road. Who are the friends of your son or daughter? What influences are around them? What media are they exposed to? What community do they live in? What school are they going to? What are they studying? What are their hobbies? So many of these things are factors. And ultimately, I don't want to make it entirely circumstantial, because I do believe that ultimately there's an agency attached to all of this. That ultimately people do have free will, and ultimately they have to accept or reject what they're exposed to. Yeah. There are circumstances, but then there's also agency. And you know, it's the issue of amr bain al-amrayn.
And I agree, and I believe in times where, I don't know if you've done this before, but I've had one time there was an aunt there talking about her daughter regarding her doubts. She said she became an atheist. She wanted me to talk. She messaged Yakin and asked me to respond to her objections, right? First thing I asked was not, what is she having a problem with? First thing I asked was, talk to me. Because what's the point of having the conversation if she doesn't even want to do it? Because she's not going to respond to my arguments, or what I'm, if she doesn't even want to do it. Because I could tell there was some pressure from that end, from her end to her daughter, that she wanted, to be more and stuff. And I understand from parents, but unless somebody wants to receive the message, you can't push them.
Right.
You can't. And we have a lot of Muslims, especially like the street Taoists, and like, these people, you can tell most of the people are uncomfortable. Like, they don't even want to be there.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like,
well, they're talking to someone they've never met before, and it's an uncomfortable issue. It's very personal, and it's like, hey, do you want to get into a fight with someone today? It's like, not really.
Not really. I was in the market.
Yeah. No, I hear you. Moving on, we spoke about adab a little bit. The adab of da'is, the adab of ex-Muslims. So, Fariduddin al-Attas, who says that the root cause of the decline of the Muslim world is due to a loss of adab. So can you explain that in more detail?
So Sayyid Naqib al-Attas.
Sorry.
It's okay, no. It sounds also...
Did I call him Fariduddin?
Yeah,
Am I mixing him up with the Mantiq al-Tayr guy?
I don't know, like, I just know that his whole family adopts the same concept, so...
Right.
I forgot half of his brother's name, so I apologize. But,
No, thank you for the correction. I appreciate it.
Okay, came up with this concept of adab, and he was trying to differentiate between adat, because in Malay, adat is etiquette. And it's a loose translation of adab. Right. So you can see this adab, right? So, but everything about that to showcase that adab is more than just etiquette with your fellow human beings. It's more than just how you behave with people. It's also how you behave with yourself. It's also how you behave with the world around you, all of creation. It's how you manifest yourself as a Khalifa of creation.
Right.
And that's what adab is, and it's mostly a balance. It's wasatiyah. It's being balanced with everything around you and performing your duty as Khalifa. Okay, so that's really what adab is. In a nutshell first. So, for example, one way of lacking adab is putting pollutants in the air. It's littering. That's a lack of adab. And
right.
I read a book recently about the whole littering problem in Hajj. Like there's garbage all over the place.
So it's not just humanistic.
No, it's not just between your fellow man. It's also like, and it's just not the outward performance of activity, but it's also within yourself. It's also how you conform your principles to your own life. It's also how you. It's generally everything about being a human being. It's being balanced in accordance with Islamic principles, right? So adab is not simply, oh, I greet my guest or I greet another Muslim, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. No, that's not the only. That's not adab. Or it's not just.
It's not substantive. It's a ritual that without its principle is superficial.
Yeah. So, like we were just mentioning, like you have to treat people in accordance with their condition or with the circumstances, right? That's adab. Whereas adat is that you treat everyone with the same, superficial sort of behavior or ritualistic motions, just going through the cultural, right? So for Asad, like the Arab hospitality would be adab, but it's not necessarily adab, right? It doesn't mean that it's adab, because for something to be adab, it has to be balanced. It has to be in conformity with the rest of yourself, the rest of your being. You can be very hospitable, but then at the same time, if you don't pay your workers, you don't have adab.
Yeah.
So that's what scientific help say is that we lack adab as a human.
That's a good point. Moving forward, you've spoken about aesthetics in the past. So Islamic theology can justify the idea that aesthetics can convey a truth, like genuinely convey a truth. And this cannot be justified by Western philosophy. So can you elaborate on what that means?
Oh, God. There's a lot to talk about because there's not much one can say with precision. Because beauty is an actual experience, same thing as love, right? Which the numerous lines of poetry that have been written about over the years, over the centuries, over the millennia, by so tons of ink, have been wasted on these subjects trying to express these emotions without any accuracy. We know what these things are. We know what beauty is, and we can tell when we see it, right? And there are people who say, well, it's subjective. I don't really agree. What I mean by subjective is that you can't factually say what is beautiful or not. I don't think that's true. I think you can. Like, I think anybody who looks at a beautiful sunset and goes, that's ugly, there's a problem. There's something wrong with them as a person.
Mm-hmm.
So
it's not just in the eye of the beholder, but it's something intrinsic.
It's intrinsic to the beholder, which is intrinsic to all humanity, unless of course you have some sort of mental issue, or you're suffering from something.
Right.
Like there are people who can't feel empathy. They have a real psychological issue. That's not their problem. But the moment is people who do not have that issue understand what empathy is, and so they've experienced it, even if they can't describe it to you, right? So, aesthetics is evidence of something. Being in awe, appreciating the order and the radiance of creation, appreciating everything around you, being able to cry at the most subtle image, because it conveys a meaning that is far more profound than you're able to write down or able to speak in any given language. It's a real experience. It's real. Same way with God. It's real experience, right? So, but nobody goes around and goes, "Oh, there's no such thing as beauty," because we can't prove it. But beauty in many ways is a gateway towards understanding the rest of reality. And there are some, even Ibn Hazm, I think, would have noted this, that beauty is in many ways a way of understanding God himself. It's a way of knowing that God is there. Because human beings are attracted to beauty because they feel fulfillment in what is around them. In many ways that conveys wakefulness, it conveys a sense of agency in the world around them. It's really hard to find. And like I said, this is a discussion that even I've written a paper about it, and even in technical in that paper, I thought that I was doing a disservice to the concept. Because to be technical about beauty is in many ways to rob it of its beauty,
Mm.
to rob the experience. It's like trying to be technical about love. Well, this chemicals happen and this interaction happens. It's like, well, that I don't want to tell that to my wife. That ruins the whole moment.
Yeah.
There's no meaning about it. But
If
when I go to an art museum, I love art, by the way. Chicago Art Museum was one of my favorite places to go when I still lived there. And when I was in Malaysia, I went to the Islamic Art Museum constantly. Staring at a painting and trying to understand what's being conveyed there, not just the image, but the meaning, the intention that the author had, the painter had. It's an experience like that you can't really describe. It's you're having an intimate relationship with the object to the extent where you become combined with that thing. Because when you understand something, when you love something, when you feel a sense of awe, in many ways it becomes part of you. And now I'm sounding all mystical, but the thing is, but that's actually the experience. If I were to convey that experience, if I were trying to understand that experience in the best way and trying to have you understand that, what it means, I think you get what I'm saying. But you have to be there to really grasp the words that are coming out of my mouth right now. If you've ever seen something so utterly beautiful, if you ever loved something to such an extent, you'll understand what I'm saying. That you literally become combined with that object, with that thing, with that person, to the extent where you're willing to give up your life, in the case of love, or you're willing to dwell upon that thing for the rest of your life as having a profound impact on you as a person. I don't know what I just said.
the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Allahu jameel wa yuhibbul jamal." Allah is beautiful and He loves beauty.
Yeah.
And I wanted to say that in my meditation, I believe that beauty is the combination of order and mercy, basically. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He is justice, but He also wrote His mercy over His justice. And thus, sometimes we see someone or something that is orderly, but it is devoid of mercy. One can say that Hitler got the trains to run on time, for example. That aspect is not beautiful. Or someone might be aesthetically pleasing, but not have the gentleness and the personality that causes you to love that person. So that person can never be truly beautiful to you. And likewise, someone could be gentle and merciful to you, but if it's coming out of a chaotic vessel, it's not something that you're ever going to be drawn to. So I think those two ingredients are necessary.
I agree.
Yeah.
There's a difference between lure and beauty itself. Just the same as the difference between lust and love. Right? There are things.
There's no mawadda. There's no mawadda in lust.
Yeah. So animals, okay, if we're biological creatures, right? We have certain impulses. We like shiny objects. Okay. But that doesn't necessitate that the shiny object is beautiful, but we'll still look at it.
Right.
Right. So the same thing with a woman. I'm speaking frankly as a man. You see a beautiful woman, you see an attractive woman, does not necessitate that you find her beautiful. Because you can get to know her, and then she's a horrible person, and then after that she becomes extremely ugly. Right. Despite her physical features. So, in the same, like what you were trying to say, you can see something that's orderly, and in the way that lures you to it, but it doesn't necessitate that it's beautiful or that there's some substance behind it that is worthy of your relationship with that thing. Yeah,
and I mean similarly, the Quran talks about ayat, right? So there's certainly macrocosmic and microcosmic signs that exist. There's signs within us and there's signs outside of us. So those things are meant to be recognized, and somebody that looks at the sunset and is not able to appreciate it in any way, yeah, there's a problem with that. Beauty is not entirely just in the eye of the beholder, although it is there. It is also intrinsic to the creation. Otherwise, Allah would not have said, that He is beautiful and loves beauty, because had beauty just been subjective, then Allah would not love it. It would be entirely something that exists within the human condition, and limited to the human condition, and is not intrinsic to anything outside the human condition. Do you mind if I ask you a final question?
Sure, go ahead, I don't mind.
So, I went to a brother, I sought advice I went to a few brothers actually, and I sought advice on what questions I should ask you.
Really?
And this particular brother, was very drawn, out of all things, mashallah, not your beauty, and not your intellectual argumentation. But by the way, this is like half a shout out. I'm literally gonna link him this video to this second, and I'm like, hey, I'm making fun of you. But anyway, so he was like, wow, I want to know about his video making process. That's what interested him. I can't say anything about that. So what is your app? And you know what? This could help a lot of people. This is a legitimate question because there's maybe 1,000 other Asadullah Ali Al-Andalusis out there who just don't know how to make a video. And so what does your average product cycle look like? What programs do you use? How long does it take to put it all together?
Depends on what I'm working on, to be honest. So say for iJihad takes the longest amount of time for those interested in knowing about iJihad, which is why I don't do them that much, because they take so much time and effort. But I literally only use 3 programs, and they're very simple. So to make all the images, all the backgrounds, I basically do it all on PowerPoint. Everything's on PowerPoint. That's it. So I edit all the images, I do all the shadows, textures, combine everything that is in iJihad and all those slides is done on PowerPoint. That's it. Wow. Which is why it takes so long. But it's the one I'm most comfortable with, and I like using it. You can do a lot with PowerPoint if you know how to use it, right? So and if you've seen, in my opinion, iJihad looks pretty good. So, but it takes me a long time to get the slides. It's like being a cartoonist. You do every slide. If you're a classical cartoonist, not a digital cartoonist, but like if you did hand drawn, right? You draw one image and they go to the next one. So that's actually how I do with PowerPoint, is that I put images in, and when I want something to move or I want a transition to take place, I'll actually duplicate the slide and then modify it slightly. So one 30-minute episode could be 150 slides.
Yeah,
I'm not joking.
So there's this famous internet atheist. He had these videos where basically like the background behind him was all black and he was just speaking, and so people were asking him like, how did you create that special effect, and they were assuming that it was computer generated and stuff, and he literally said it's a bleeping black sheet on the wall. That's it. Like it's just a curtain. And he like showed the camera. It's like, hey, dude, it's just a curtain, man. Like, there's nothing complicated about it. So, sometimes the simplest things, it's kind of like Star Wars. The original Star Wars, they had, like, the costumes, okay? In many cases, that ages a lot better than the computer-generated stuff. So,
which is why I brought it back.
What'd you say?
Which is why I'm happy that Abrams brought it back.
Yeah, I have got mixed feelings about that movie, but...
Yeah, well... I did like the special effects, though. I did like the real effects. Yeah. But likewise and then for audio, I use Audacity. Audio is always my biggest problem, to be honest, because you have to get a good mic, and you have to be able to edit the audio. And I learned all this stuff on YouTube and stuff. I'm not a professional by any means, so you can find a lot of errors in my videos and stuff, especially with editing. But yeah, iJihad in general takes the longest amount of time. That said, I've been going back to this method. I've started not the new method where I use a sheet in the background. You can see here my setup actually right here. I bought this online. I put it up and I got my chair and everything back there. And generally, when I make a video, first I figure out what topic I want to talk about. I'll draw a general outline. So like I'll write, unless it's iJihad, I'll write like a whole script and I'll just read off the script. That takes a little while. But like my other videos, like this one where I show my face and I'm talking, I just have a general outline that I read off. Like basically, I'll just move down the list. Like here's the subject I'm talking about next, and I rehearse. And when I mean by rehearse, I don't rehearse lines. I rehearse points. So, right. And then I remind myself I need to move on to this point next after I'm done with the argument, and I just keep going. So it's a process that takes time. I mean, if you want to do a video where you're showing your face and you're talking, you have to be very comfortable with yourself and an audience. You have to practice public speaking, to be honest, because that's really what it is, just in front of a camera. Thankfully, you have editing, so that helps. So, in case you make a mistake. And as for my editing software, I use a very basic software. I don't use anything advanced because I using really complex stuff. I used to use Windows Movie Maker and file, and now I use Movavi. Pretty simple. It has a very similar format to Windows Movie Maker, and it's not very expensive, and I can get a lot of stuff out of it. It's got a lot of good transitions. So yeah, I would say that's my method. That said, I also try to make sure that if you want to know like my argument style, very brief on that, I try to anticipate everything that's going to be said.
Yeah.
That's why my videos are so long.
How long does it take you to put together?
Altogether?
Like, how long does it take you to put it together? Yeah.
It really depends. Like, iJihad episode can take like, because with my work schedule and school schedule, things can take like 2 or 3 months. A regular like video like this, where I'm just sort of talking off the cuff, can take an hour with editing. And when I'm planning a video, like the series with my Understanding Jihad with Robert Spencer, that can take like a couple of days, maybe at most. But the thing is, like, I rarely find time to actually do these things. That's the problem. People don't realize that I have a life outside of videos. Unlike a lot of these Islamophobes who make this their career. Like, I don't, I have a job and I have to go to school. So it's really difficult for me to be very consistent. But I'm trying to pick up the pace now as best as I can. So, yeah, that's it. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm looking at that sheet on the wall, and to be completely honest with you, like, initially when I was looking at it, it looked, the lines are all warped, and it looked like it was moving, like there's kind of wind coming into your house or something. Yeah. And I was like, maybe I'm just digesting something wrong or something. Like, I thought I was seeing things. I was like, this is Alim al-Mithal, I think this is what Carl Jung was talking about. But then, no, the fact that that's a sheet, I mean, it's just amazing me right now. That's a really cool sheet, I gotta say.
Yeah.
I mean, the audience is not going to see all of it because it, like, my recording dealie doesn't, it kind of cuts it off. Oh, there we go. Yeah. So, I mean, that is awesome. That is
I like it too. That said,
you should have made that the background for this video.
I'm sorry, I don't want to move it. So the thing is, something else is that if you're going to make videos, try to make your videos pleasing to the eyes. Especially if they're going to be long. That's what I try to do. I like beauty, for example. I like art.
That's so why you're very well groomed for this interview.
I'm not going to. No, thank you. No, but part of it is marketing. But I would also tell you, if you're trying to do videos, don't fall for that culture of the 10-minute rule, the 5-minute rule. No, you won't be very popular. I'm going to be honest. But if you want integrity, if you want to have integrity, if you want to approach a subject sincerely, you can't use just 10 minutes. I'm sorry. That's something I'm always preaching about, and a lot of people don't like it. They say, well, everyone has short attention spans and they want memes. It's like, I don't care. That's the type of culture Muslims should be opposing. That's what's causing all the problems for us in the information age, is because we have that mentality. You know what I mean? That reactionary memery is also what's fueling Islamophobia. Do you really want to use the same fuel for Islamophobia? That's all they function off, is sound bites and memes. That's why.
I mean, even Dawkins, who came up with that idea, it's intellectual virus.
That's what it is. It's an intellectual virus.
Yeah. So I wanted to also say that this is one of the reasons why I don't like to use Twitter. Some people will say, like, okay, why don't you go on Twitter? It's 180 characters. It's a great way to build an audience. I'm like, well, is it really? Because when I go on Twitter, I don't have Twitter, but when I go on it, all I see is people insulting everybody. Some guy he trolled his way into the White House on Twitter. Did you hear about this?
I didn't, but I'm not surprised that happened.
Well, it's Donald Trump, but
yeah, there you go. Okay, good job.
Yeah, but basically, there's tons of insults. There's tons of I'm gonna come out and say something very controversial. Okay, are you ready for it?
Go ahead.
I like Facebook.
Okay. So
okay. Well, I'm telling you, most people, they want to rant about it. People that are on it all the time, they talk about how much time they're wasting. I like Facebook. I'll tell you why. I'm not saying Zuckerberg is a great guy. There's all kinds of privacy problems with Facebook. There's all kinds of surveillance problems with Facebook. There's also potential intellectual, information wars that happen on Facebook. All of that aside, it is a fairly family-friendly environment
Sorry.
A lot of mature conversations, respectful conversations occur on Facebook. It's
Yeah.
well moderated in general. Um, and yeah, I mean, on Twitter, there's all kinds of nudity and obscene content and gore. There's a lot of insults. There's a lot of fake activists, career activists, so-called journalists with blue check marks. It's a very intimidating place where I feel like all that really happens, at least in the subject matter that we're interested in, be it religion or politics or what have you. It's mostly very aggressive stuff.
Oh, that's
Facebook,
cool.
I've had my page for a year now. Alhamdulillah, I haven't had any trolls whatsoever. Um, it might partly be the content, like the kind of stuff that I'm posting is not attracting the flies so much. But alhamdulillah, like I'm seeing steady growth with the page. I'm very happy with it. Facebook's got very good insights on page growth and on um, like audience retention and what posts are doing well and what posts are not doing well. It's a fairly good platform, and my fear is that Generation Z, which is slowly moving away from Facebook and moving closer to Instagram and moving closer to Twitter, that's really the kind of ADHD fueling, uh, you know, like direct impulse type of internet content. The memes that you're referring to, the intellectual viruses, the clickbait, the nudity, the things that are meant to just pop up at you and create a visceral reaction. That to me is way worse than anything that I've seen on Facebook.
I mean, it happens on Facebook, but it's easier to control your platform when you're there, and it's easier to amass an audience that um, has a far greater view of things.
Well, look. So, Instagram, it took like the selfies and the nudity away from my timeline. Like, people put their personal pictures now on their Instagram. Twitter took the insults. Like all these other platforms took something away, and now when I go on my Facebook feed, it might be the way that I've designed my feed, depending on who you're adding and who you're removing, of course. But most of my Facebook feed are like articles, posts like yours, things that are insightful. And of course, some of that's by design. It depends on what you're following. But I just feel like you're just not gonna have that on Twitter, and you're just not gonna have that on Instagram. You just can't.
You know what's interesting too that you mentioned that is that there's actually pretty good evidence to showcase that there's less of that mentality on Facebook because if you notice, like a lot of these popular ex-Muslims and Islamophobes and stuff, their following is far less uh, interactive, is far less active, is far less. They have far less of a following on Facebook than anywhere else. YouTube, Twitter, that's where mob justice gets done and they can do all the damage, right? But when it comes to Facebook, that's why I like it when ex-Muslims and Islamophobes come on my page because I know I got this under control. It's like they can't do anything to me.
Most of these people have their like family and friends and like their old relatives on Facebook, right? So like Facebook is a lot less anonymous than these other platforms.
God, yeah.
Yeah, like so in a sense, like yeah, I mean people are not going to be as gutsy as on Facebook. If they're going to post something, they know that they could get fired from their job or something, so they're a little bit more like the way they would be in real life, basically.
Which is how it should be. You know, when they say, "Well, no, that's not good for free speech." No, well, you got to think about this. And it's something that we talked about in my degree program as well. Is anonymity really a great thing when it's primarily used to abuse other people?
It's not good for religion.
Well, it's not. Well, it's not good for that. But it's like most people who claim that they need to be anonymous are usually the people who are doing bad stuff. Like,
Hmm.
most of the time. I'm not saying like political dissidents and stuff. Like, obviously, they would need their anonymity to hide against tyrants and things like this. It's a different story. But the vast majority of people who argue for anonymity are those individuals who just want to mob people online and harass them
Yeah.
constantly. That's
Yeah.
really the majority of people who do this.
I would say, I mean, there's a great argument for internet anonymity, for privacy. Obviously, the stuff that Google is getting away with is really, really atrocious,
Yeah.
and everybody should be concerned about that.
Yeah.
But I see what you mean, definitely, that especially in the realm of, especially in your world and in my world, anonymity usually means threats, and it means people, lobbing lewd comments and insults at us, and
Not
not
that.
being there to actually own up to what they're saying as well.
Not for
They're
that.
hiding behind their keyboards, right?
But even on Reddit, the Reddit X Missing forum has doc dropped me several times. They've tried to get me harmed and things like they literally, and they're hiding behind their anonymous profiles.
Yeah.
And I've complained to Reddit several times. They don't care, but like people do these things when they know they can get away with it. But if they were to reveal their real names and not be anonymous, obviously, they would think twice about such stupid behavior.
I actually made the decision 10 years ago, or not 10 years ago, last year, because I used to entirely just do my Islamic readings and studying and posts, not behind a camera. Basically, I would do it mostly independently and anonymously. But maybe like a year ago, after a lot of soul searching and a lot of consultation and meditation, I decided to start basically this page with my name on it and with my face on it. And part of the reason for that is because I want to be held accountable. I think that there's a problem of Sheikh Googles out there, that there's tons of people with, basically fake names, fake profile pictures, or no profile pictures at all. The masked Arab, quote unquote, people like that even on the Muslim side, right? Who are able to say whatever they want without being held accountable in any way to it. So their reputation doesn't nothing happens to them.
And it's funny how they always justify that. They're always like, "Oh, I don't want to get killed."
Yeah, I know that's what they say, but
I really want to kill you. Even if I knew who you were, I wouldn't waste my time. Relax. It's just that you're just saying that as an excuse because yeah.
Well, here's the thing: is that I feel, maybe the person has gotten threats, right? But the issue is so much of what creates visceral reactions in people that may cause them to have violent impulses or feelings wouldn't happen if they were not anonymous. In other words, in real life, you find that most people actually get along pretty well. And I think that's because the fitrah of the human being is generally good. You find that the online world is a place where a lot of this aggression is taken out on. That they have a bad day at work, it doesn't manifest in the workplace, they come home and they attack Muslims online or they attack some other group online. In most cases, I think that once that real human connection is there, then the internet will no longer be just the collective human subconscious, but it'll actually be a place where relationships are made. I think right now, in a sense, the internet is kind of just this big basement of human consciousness. It's kind of like half of the internet is pornography, first of all. And then the other half is social media. So it's kind of take your pick, basically. It is kind of this rat-infested, dark, lonely place. And in many respects, it's the exact opposite of what people had envisioned the internet to be in the 90s. I remember, me and you are old enough to remember what the world was like before there was an internet. And the internet was the coolest thing in the world because you can play StarCraft with some guy in Korea, and that was the coolest thing. But it just seems like right now it's echo chamber after echo chamber, and I made a post recently about how one of the signs of the end times is the reversal of ethics. Basically, the righteous people being at the bottom of society, those of people of batil being at the top of society, etc. Well, right now we've created an internet free market, a social media free market, where in order to get views, you have to say and do something controversial.
Yep.
And the most controversial thing is to attack somebody. And so you have all kinds of Islamic people that claim to be speaking for Islam, who, in an effort to gain social media notoriety, they employ this same tactic. And so what ends up happening is that this ends up trickling down to the masses, that if people see their shayukh behaving in such a way where they're constantly insulting everybody and attacking everybody and being aggressive and confrontational, then guess what? I mean, the people that take you as a role model are going to start behaving the same way.
Yep.
And I feel like in many ways this is kind of engineered, either accidentally or on purpose, to fulfill that end times prophecy about the reversal of ethics.
I mean, there's certainly plays a role. I don't know if it's deliberate necessarily. I mean, like I think it's just an organic process that's been ongoing. I mean, the thing about the internet that makes it so horrible, when I say that, because that's even a controversial statement to make now, is that instead of really enlightening us, instead of making us better people, it takes advantage of the incivility of human beings as marketing. You know, and much of the internet is run by Western world and Western ethos. So money, like I said, is the king above all things. It doesn't matter how moral you are, how spiritual you are. What matters is how many views you can get and how many advertisements can be produced as a result of that. So, you know, the reason Trump is still there, despite being a douchebag, you know, is because he has a huge following. It's not just because he's president of the United States, because he has a huge following. And, you know, to remove him from Twitter or to remove any of these Islamophobes from YouTube or something would hurt YouTube's income.
It's bad for business. It's bad for business. And well, that's a very good point. And I think that the internet, although it's an amazing tool for genuine researchers, it's kind of made it more difficult to sift out the frauds and con people from legitimate researchers. In other words, before, if you didn't know what you were talking about, it was pretty evident generally, because if you had to speak to these people in real life or over the phone, and it was very evident if they didn't know what they were talking about. Nowadays, it's very easy to give the guise and the veneer that you know what you're talking about, because you can always Google whatever reference that you're looking for and confirm your own biases and use that in an argument. So in many cases, ex-Muslims and either Muslims themselves will use arguments that they are not familiar with. They never actually read the books from beginning to end, but they found, oh, Ibn Taymiyyah said this, Al-Ghazali said that, Bukhari has this hadith, Khulaini has that hadith. And it's like they have no idea what the context of these things are. They haven't actually done the studying. And I think most of all, and this is a point that confounded me years ago, I used to be somebody that relied entirely on primary sources, and that is still kind of a guilty pleasure of mine. But that was until I started bringing like my knowledge to these book clubs and these reading circles. And then I noticed that I was actually kind of a jerk, to be honest, because I came across people that really respected the literature. Like, they read the books with sheikhs that taught them how to respect that knowledge and how to apply that knowledge and how to be pragmatic with it and how to be humble with it. Like, what the internet doesn't teach you is humility, because you can find all the facts and information in the world, and you can be an encyclopedia of information, but what good is it if everybody you're coming across, you're just waterboarding them with these facts, right? Mm-hmm. I feel that having a sheikh can teach you how to respect and how to apply the knowledge. And the best relationship is when it's knees to knees and heart to heart. Yeah,
and unfortunately, though, and I'm not trying to disagree with you necessarily, and I agree, it is difficult nowadays too, especially with there being a lack of scholars. There being scholars who are not local to most Muslims, especially in the West. And there also being the fact that the Muslim Ummah in general doesn't respect scholarship. I mean, we send our best and brightest to engineering school and medical school, and we send our worst performers to the madrasa.
Yeah.
I'm not saying necessarily that all scholars are of that, background. I don't want to be insulting, but that is the mentality among many within this ummah. So, it's not just the internet. I think the internet exasperates it, makes it worse, but I think there is a cultural element in the modern world that started all this off. And like I said, democratization of knowledge really caused a huge problem here, and just the disrespect for scholarship in general and expertise. And that's not to say that we should idolize scholars or experts, and put them on a pedestal where they're unreachable. But there has to come a point where we need to admit our own ignorance.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, a lot of people online, especially just the modern world in general, use the internet as a means to promote their own arrogance, thinking that they're being humble because, oh, I'm just sharing my opinion. And, the moment you disagree with them, they become very narcissistic and they recoil, like, how dare you, and so going back, to the main subject, the discussion here, a lot of people don't realize that Islamophobia, in large part, the ex-Muslim movement, so-called, is really driven by this mentality. And that's one of the reasons why it's difficult to also combat it, because it doesn't matter how smart you are. It doesn't matter what your IQ is. It doesn't matter how much information, how many facts, how coherent you are even. At the end of the day, these people aren't going to change because of that. And that's a sad reality that I have to face. It's like, that's paradoxical too. It's like, what do you do then? Right? What are you supposed to do if you're putting all your energy and ability into this and it's not making the results?
Right.
How can you change this cultural mentality? And I think Muslims need to start doing that first, is really changing their understanding of how they perceive education, how they perceive their own knowledge, how they perceive knowledge in general, how they perceive expertise. Because in reality, we're never going to surpass our enemies, intellectual or otherwise, until we really start there, until we really start to do some real introspection and reform. And I hate that word, by the way, when it comes to religion, but reform our mindset.
Mm-hmm. Rectify, yeah.
Rectify.
Yeah. Well, you know what? This was an amazing discussion. I think there's going to be a lot that people are going to be benefit from everything that you've shared with us, alhamdulillah, and shared. So, I just want to remind everybody to keep us in their sincere dua, and to, inshallah, support Asadullah Ali Al-Andalusi in any way that you can. Okay, you can follow his iJihad series on YouTube. You can follow his Facebook page, which is under his name, Asadullah Ali Al-Andalusi. And follow his work also on the Yaqeen Institute. So definitely check all of that out. Is there anything that you'd like to close with?
No, I'd just like to say thank you very much for having me on the show. And, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala continue your work, facilitating your work here and trying to, sort of change the Muslim mentality and to make more of these discussions to open the minds of Muslim Ummah and those around them, because we sincerely need these sort of platforms these days. And I truly appreciate you making this platform. Not just for people like myself, but for yourself, to express your own ideas as well, because we need more Muslims to come out and say, to say things and to take back, our platform from these Islamophobes and ex-Muslims. So jazakallah khairan for that. And, I just pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala facilitates the da'wah and assist us in progressing towards a better future, inshallah.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. Thanks for joining us on Bilal's Boulder. See you next time.